Hi there, hope you're well. In this one I'm making a Mondrian-style side table from Finsa Fibracolour, coloured all through MDF. If you don't know Mondrian, he's a 18th century Dutch post-impressionist, best remembered for abstract geometric blocks of primary colour separated by black lines. I thought those lent themselves particularly well compositionally to this kind of project. I did a smaller scale version of this in birch ply when I did my workshop drawers a little while back, and I had some decent sized pieces of Fibracolour left after my recent no tape, no ruler draw project, and I thought a small table might be just the perfect chance to make use of them. I've got to say though, this is one of the most challenging jobs I've ever done. It's taken me almost 3 weeks to complete, and it's far from perfect, with many mistakes made along the way. We'll loop back to those a little bit later on. Now, I didn't want to just copy a Mondrian painting, so I made my own composition in the style of, and I'm pretty happy with how the whole thing hangs together. I made a full-size printout. The Fibracolour I have is 430mm, about 17 inches square, so that's how big the table is, and I used that printed pattern as a guide to cut templates from thin MDF that I could then lay out with 12mm or half-inch spacing in between. I used my straw bite waist side jigs together with a stop clamped onto the bench to cut 12mm wide strips of black Fibracolour for the lines. And then I could use those MDF templates to cut the Fibracolour blocks that made up the pattern. Cutting small pieces with a chop saw or miter saw was surprisingly challenging. I'd recommend taping the very small pieces to a larger piece in order to keep your fingers well clear. And I found it much easier to handle when I added in a piece of scrap 6mm MDF as a sacrificial base, both easier to keep the workpiece flat and to get a cleaner cut. The table design is pretty simple. It's a top beveled onto flat sides with a shelf between them. But at this stage I hadn't decided what to do with the sides exactly. Part of me wanted the easy option of just using a flat colour, black or dark grey, and part of me wanted to do something a little bit fancier, so I just concentrated on the top for now. With all the pieces cut, these were simply glued together with a fast grab PVA adhesive. I say simply, it was quite tricky to get the clamping pressure just right, so that there's enough grab for the glue to stick, but not so much that the individual pieces move under clamping. I thought I was taking it slow and steady, but the first section I completed was bowed when the glue set, so it was back to the drawing board for that one, and less pressure on the clamps. When bringing together the final mosaics for the complete top, I used an old MFT top for the glue up, clamping the larger section down at the corners to help keep it flat. Some masking tape or painter's tape under the glue line also helps to prevent the workpiece sticking to the bench top, and being on a separate top, it meant that once clamped, the whole workpiece could be moved away while the glue set to let me get on with other work. I decided to make the sides out of dark grey Fibracolour, same as my benches, with black lines separating the grey block. So, of course, it made perfect sense at the time to try and waterfall the lines from the top so they continued down the sides. With the benefit of hindsight, though, it would have made more sense to make the top wider so that it extended into the sides and then cut the top section away, as that would have guaranteed a perfect match from the top to the sides. I didn't think of that at the time, and there are a few discrepancies, one to the other, which we'll look at later. Of course, since I did the waterfall trick with the sides, it made sense to do that with the shelf as well. This was more of a challenge though, as the height of the shelf clashed with some of the horizontal black lines, and I decided to use flat blocks of black Fibracolour to extend those horizontal lines into the pattern. So with the top and sides glued up, sanded back and roughly trimmed to size, I could lay them flat so that the black lines flowed as closely as possible between them, and then I could trim the edges with a single cut with the track saw. And it was while doing this that I discovered my next mistake. I had gone in a bit too heavy with the sander on the top, and there was a ridge of about 1 millimetre between the top and the side. This would have made the bevel cut impossible at this edge, so I decided to cut out that corner section, remake it and try and patch it in. The cutting and remaking was pretty straightforward, but after a little careful chisel work, I realised that the black lines where the patched in piece fitted weren't quite square, so I needed to trim the new piece slightly. Except my sacrificial base on the miter saw was only good for 90-degree cuts. It's an old trick, but a piece of P120 abrasive against the fence kicked the workpiece out just enough to cut a slight angle on the end, which made for a much better fit and an easier glue up. And once set, the edges of the new piece could be blended into the rest with a sander. Bevel cuts next, and after a quick test to make sure the angle was good, these were easily completed with a track saw. There were a few options to join the top to the sides, but I wanted to be able to flat pack the table, so the choice really was between the Peanut 2 connector and the Lamello Clamex. The sides aren't quite as flat as I'd like, so I opted for the Clamex, and it's been a little while since I used the Lamello, and I managed to mess up on one of the cuts by not seating it properly, so that had to be filled and then recut when the filler was set. With the sides sorted, I could trim back the shelf to be a snug fit, and then use the back of the guide rail on my DIY MFT bench to cut the slots for the Clamex, lining the Lamello up against the edges and against a white pencil line for the centre. Those white pencils aren't just for walnut, you know. As I'm referencing off the base of the lamello to cut the slots in the sides, I also need to reference off the base when I'm cutting the slots in the shelf, and I'm simply doing this flat on the bench top. The climax fittings need a hole for the hex key, and I'm making sure I place these on the underside of all the workpieces. With all the cutting and machining done, I can give everything a final sand to P320. And then apply a couple of coats of Keith Rag & Bone Brown's clear wax oil finish, buffing it up to a nice sheen a couple of hours later. So that's the completed table. Deeply flawed and with many mistakes, as far from perfect as anything that I've ever made. And none of that matters because I learned a huge amount while doing this, possibly that I never want to do another one of these again. But if I do, then I'll be much better placed to make a much better job of it. One thing that did surprise me was just how precise you need to be for this kind of thing. It turns out that the 12mm black strips here were fractionally off one end to the other, and that definitely contributed to some of the out of squareness that I was getting. They weren't entirely perpendicular either. They looked okay if you put a square on them, but they definitely fitted better one way up over the other, face up versus face down. And all of that actually has me thinking about table saws. I've never really used one or felt the need for one for the kind of work that I used to do, but this kind of finicky, precise work, especially on tiny components, has really made me consider one as an option. So if anyone knows of a compact, quiet, trimming table saw with great dust collection, be sure to let me know. I'll call this one done though for now. Thanks for taking a look, and I'll see you next time. All right, take care. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support the channel even further, you can do that by becoming a member at 10-Minute Workshop Plus. Plus is my new independent member platform over at 10minuteworkshop.com. There's lots of details there, or you could head up 10minuteworkshop.plus to sign up directly. It's a free sign up, but with additional benefits for members who are on a paid plan. Plus members have access to ad-free and sometimes extended versions of the public-facing YouTube videos, as well as all kinds of exclusive content from behind-the-scenes snippets and outtakes to weekly vlogs and additional midweek content, discounts on 10-Minute Workshop products, free plans, plus a lively new members forum where you can get your questions answered, or maybe provide some answers for other folks too. So if any or all of that sounds like your kind of thing, we'd love to have you on board and taking part. There are links down below as always. Thanks so much for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.